Hey everyone, Julian here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make techno kicks like this. Now to go along with this video, I've just put out a small sample pack. It's got 5 kicks in it, and basically what I've got here is for each kick, I have a dry sample, and then the wet sample with this reverb on it. The wet one's a little bit quiet. Basically, what this is meant to do is it gives you a few kicks to kind of play around with. So if you want to put them into this Reverb Rack, which is also in there, I'll talk about that in a second, you can. Or if you want to just take the wet one and just use it as a sample, nothing wrong with that either. You know, you can play around with a few of them. You can even like take these wet samples and maybe splice them together with some of the dry samples or even your own kick samples and make reverb kicks out of that as well. It's really up to you, but it's all in there. And yeah, there's also this reverb rack which you can use to create this kind of effect. So like if you have a kick sample you want to play around with, you can put it into this rack, and yeah, it's all in there. So let's dive in. So how do you make these kind of kicks? What the kind of secret is, or what the technique you want to go for is you want to have basically 2 chains. And the way I'm doing this is I'm using an audio effect rack. So if we open up the chains here, you see I have one called wet and one called dry, one completely dry, and one completely wet. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow you to have more control over the effect. The thing is with these kind of kicks, they can be kind of finicky. You can't really just like drop a reverb on and play with the dry, wet, and the decay time and expect it to have that like big warehousey kind of sound. You have to do a lot of stuff to it, and the things that you have to do to the reverb, which you'll see in a second, aren't really things you could do and still keep the dry signal. So I like to just kind of keep it as 2 chains like this. I suppose you could also do this with like 2 audio tracks. I just did it in audio effect rack to make it easy for myself. So like I said, the dry chain, it's just a dry signal, no processing there. But on the wet one, we have some effects. So the first thing we have going on here is I have this reverb, which is completely wet. And it's got a pretty short decay time, not too long, but that sounds like this. So that's giving us the basis of our sound. Obviously, that's where the reverb is. That's where sort of like all the stuff is happening that you're hearing. And then there's a little bit of stuff on after that to just kind of beef it up and give it that sound. So the next thing that's on there is this amp, which sounds like this. I know, pretty terrible. But there are a few key things that are going on here. And now, what's going on here is basically this amp is just distorting that reverb and like really blowing it out. But if you listen to the low end, it's kind of bringing out a little bit of that bass. Like before this amp, there really isn't enough bass for this to like really work as a kick. So I really like using these amps. Another small thing here is that this output is set to mono. That's another thing, like with really low reverb like this, you don't really want to have it in stereo because like stereo in the low end doesn't really sound too good. It kind of just gets messy, and it can mess up the phasing of your tracks, or it can cause phasing issues in your tracks, as well as just kind of like messing up your mixes. So I guess that's another nice thing about this. I guess you could also do that with the utility. But yeah, so that's how I set the amp. Again, this is just really bringing out this reverb and like really giving it that crunch and that texture. So the last thing on this chain is this auto filter, which is just doing a simple low pass, and that is going to sound like this. So you can hear that's really where the techno kick kind of sound comes from. That like deep, warehousey, bassy kind of reverb sound. It's really coming from having the reverb going into the amp and just getting like blown out, and then sort of dialing it back with the low pass filter to just bring out that low end that we want and give us that nice, warm, deep kind of reverb to kick sound. So yeah, that's really the main things to make this sound. Now, you could do a few other things to it, I guess. Like, you know, you could play around with maybe like some chorus or something if you did want it to be stereo. Maybe you could like EQ the sound a little bit if you wanted to bring certain things out. Maybe like some bit crushing could be interesting. There are a lot of different things that you could do, but this is the main sort of key thing that you have to do to get this sound started. And now, like I said, you can get the samples as well as this rack in the pack that's in the description on my Bandcamp's first link. You can't miss it. And yeah, that's going to be it for today, guys. Make sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments. And make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. Maybe even share the video if it really helped you out. And I'll see you guys again tomorrow with another tutorial.